my name's Amanda and welcome to part 2 of my Quilt-Along-With-Me series. Today I will be showing you how to sash and border your blocks together so you have a nice complete quilt top. Now, just like in part 1, there is a pattern sheet that goes along with this video, so there is a link down below that you can click on and download the pattern that has all of the measurements and details that you will need to do part 2. In the pattern sheet there is also a diagram there that shows you where all of the different sashing pieces go and how to attach the border, just so if you get confused by the way that I'm explaining it to you here, you can go and have a look at the pattern sheet and see visually how all of the sashing pieces come together to have your completed quilt top. So let me get straight into it by showing you how to sash together your first 2 blocks to complete your first row. But first of all, we need to cut out all of our strips, and this is the way that I like to do it. So what you first simply need to do is square up your white fabric, or the fabric that you've set aside for your sashing, and then cut 4 3.5-inch strips across the width of fabric. Then cross cut 2 of them to 23 inches, and then the other 2 at 23.25 inches. And then from the print cut 1 3.5-inch square. I'll go through all of the measurements and cutting instructions for the outside border strips a little later on in the video. So this is the way that I like to sash my blocks. Place one of the 23-inch strips along the edge of one of your blocks, ensuring that all edges and corners are lined up evenly. Then pin the strip securely into place. Carefully sew a 1/4-inch seam along this edge, ensuring that all of the seams along the bottom are lying flat the right way before sewing over them. After setting the seam, gently press the seam towards the sashing strip with a medium to hot steamy iron. Next, place another block on your work surface and place the sashed block on top, aligning the sashing edge with the edge of the block on the bottom, and then pin the edge in place. Carefully sew another 1/4-inch seam, keeping an eye out for any of those seams that aren't flat before sewing over them. And then press this seam, like before, towards the sashing. And that is your first row finished. And then just simply repeat the same set of steps to sash together your other 2 blocks that you have with the other 23-inch sashing strip. The next step is to make the sashing strip that will run horizontally between the sashed top and bottom rows. So to make this, just simply piece using a 1/4-inch seam, the 3.5-inch square, to either ends of the 23.25-inch long strips. Press the center seams outwards so that they can nest comfortably with the seams on the sashed rows. So next is to now attach the center sashing to the top and bottom rows. Do this by first laying out the bottom row and then flipping the center sashing over onto its top edge. Nest the 2 seams in the center, then pin the edge securely into place. Sew another 1/4-inch seam along this edge, pressing the seam inwards towards the center sashing strip. Next, lay out the top row of sash blocks and place the bottom row on top. Nest the 2 seams in the middle and pin this and the rest of the edge into place. Sew a 1/4-inch seam and then patiently press it inwards towards the center of the quilt top. So that's sashing all of our blocks together. Now we're going to cut and add all of the outside borders to finish our quilt top. So to do this, you will first need to cut 6 5-inch strips from across the width of fabric that you're using for the borders. Set aside 4 strips and then with the other 2, cut them in half, resulting in 4 half-meter strips. Next, you want to attach each of these smaller strips to the end of each of the 4 longer strips you set aside earlier. Do this by simply sewing a 1/4-inch seam in from the selvage edge. Snip the joining threads and then with a ruler and blade, trim off the selvage edge a 1/4 inch away from the stitched line on all 4 border strips. Then at the ironing board, open the seam out using your fingers. Press the seam flat with the iron, resulting in a less bulky seam. And then do this to the other 3 border strips. So the next step is to now attach these border strips to the quilt top. All of your border strips should be about the same length. I measured about 48 inches, so it doesn't really matter which one you start with. Just start with one and start piecing them on. So along one side edge of the quilt top, securely pin a border strip on, ensuring that the ends of the strip reaches past the length of the quilt top. Patiently sew a 1/4 inch seam along this edge, as the quilt top is now getting quite large and heavy to handle. Before pressing the seam, carefully cut off the excess fabric at the end of the border strip, about 1 inch out from the quilt top. Then press the seam outwards towards the border strip. And then just simply follow the same set of steps to attach another border strip to the opposite side of the quilt top. Now if you've made it this far into the video and I have successfully managed to confuse you, please print out the pattern sheet and look at the diagram that I have drawn out for you. Hopefully by looking at that you will sort of grasp the way that we're piecing this quilt together. So print out the pattern, please. Please. Okay, so now we're at the stage where we're going to piece on our last 2 border strips and then the quilt top is done, yeah! And to do this we're just going to simply place and pin another border strip onto one of the sides that hasn't been bordered up yet. So do this by obviously pinning it on like before and ensuring that the border strips are running past the edge of the quilt top. Patiently sew another 1/4 inch seam along the pinned edge, still ensuring that all seams underneath are flat before sewing over them. Now before pressing the seam open, tidy the seam edge by trimming off any excess fabric that reaches past the 1/4 inch seam you've just sewn. Then also trim down the excess fabric from off the end of the border strip just like before. Press the seam outwards in the same way as the previous 2 border strips and then repeat the same set of steps to attach the last border strip to the opposite side. And then lastly, give the quilt top a really good press with a hot steamy iron and then hang it up to avoid any unnecessary crinkles. So you can see my quilt top hanging in the background here. The way that I like to do that is I just put the 2 little clicky type coat hangers on the sides and then I sort of hang it up in like a doorway or in front of my wardrobe or any sort of ledge that will allow hooks to sort of attach to or hold on to, and then I can have the quilt top just sort of, you know, hanging there and not getting crinkled or ruined or anything like that. So I'm going to sound like a broken record again and say everything that you'll need to know about this step. If I've confused you at all, it is all down in the pattern sheet and the link is down below. So click on it and you will be able to print it off. Now if you're watching this and you missed out on part 1, there is a link to that video on the screen right now. Go watch that and catch up with your blocks, and then you can come back here and sash them all together and have your quilt top ready to be basted. And moving on to basting, that is what we're doing in part 3. I will be showing you how to piece together a backing, and I'm also going to be talking about different types of batting and also the different ways you can baste your quilt, and I'm going to show you the method that I use when I'm basting my quilt. So I really hope that you can join me with that, and of course if you have any questions or concerns about this video or your blocks, or if there's anything about the pattern sheet that's wrong, anything, please comment below and I will definitely answer back to you and we can discuss what needs to be discussed together. Now so many of you have been sharing with me your blocks and they are just absolutely wonderful. You are all just so creative and wonderful. If you have made your blocks and you haven't shared them with me, please do. I would absolutely love to see what they look like. You can tag me on Instagram at 3 3/4. You can tag me on Twitter at 3 3/4. You can show me your blocks on Facebook or even in an email if that's what you feel comfortable with. You'll find all of the links to the places that you can find me down below. So thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you in part 3. Bye!